Hello, people, and welcome to. You're allowed to say hi. You can say hi to people.
Hello.
Oh my god. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having great time, as you can obviously see that me and Chris are having here. This will potentially be
The end of season 1.
the end of season 1. Very well said. Very well said. That's why I'm together with you. And this is the piece. This is the last piece in oil that I've made. And this is also,
Is this really the last? Is this the last work you did in oil?
yes.
Huh.
I have finished one after this, but yes.
This is the final project.
That is the final project because this is the piece where I've decided that I do not want to use oil. And I do not want to paint in oil, and that I also have decently annoying reactions to either oil or turpentines or whatever it is. I started getting rashes all over my skin, and also I started, just in the context of this detox that we've been speaking about, I started developing headaches upon every interaction. Even when I didn't use turpentine, but although I was using gum sole.
So, in relation to this, was it these things that came up that led you to that conclusion, or was there something else with the interaction with this painting that sort of symbolized that this would to be your last oil painting? And when did you know it?
Well, I think it really nicely connects to the piece that we spoke prior about, inscription of information. Because, again, due to the personal trajectory, I think once I have never truly contemplated my own imprint in the world. We also, but that's the beauty of it, like, isn't it? We all know that we create imprint. We all know that we inevitably both inscribe and transcribe information. But do we actually know what are the long-term effects of what we're doing? And as I was writing information, I'm sorry. As I've created the pieces of information, the informational series. I mean, all of them are informational series, but the last piece is where I inscribe information. I was truly contemplating about what am I doing, and I'm a big nature lover. If I have the choice of spending my weekend in the city or going somewhere to enjoy nature, I do prefer nature. However, nature is also highly contaminated. So you kind of never leave the city, do you? So within all the context, the toxicity of the existence, and in the context of my own detox, the toxicity of the personal input became a very important topic to me. And the way we deal with toxicity is that we have, when somebody says that somebody's toxic, it's about, we speak about the energetical and the emotional input and output. However, as I was painting, I had really hard time painting with oil. I thought that me and oil will be a match made in heaven. I love its organic fluidity. In my mind, I loved oil, and I thought that oil loved me back. But when we started interacting, it became a challenging relationship, and I've never in my life have I learned to give up. I've never learned to let go. Like, you start something, you finish it, and you execute it to the T. But oil and this painting was where I drew the line, where I said enough. And I think that is also quite reflected in the painting itself. Um, I was arguing with oil, and I was arguing with this painting a lot, and I was going back and forth, and I did not understand that a lot of what was happening to me was exactly because of the exposure to these hypertoxic substances. I kind of really enjoy that the recent movements, artistic movements, are trying to distance themselves from oils. I mean, they're water soluble oils, and they are an alternative. However, the whole process of extraction of pigments, the creation of turpentine, odorless or with odor, that's it's something that creates a big imprint on the nature. And I, as an artist, as somebody who has reclaimed, like through my work, I have reclaimed my own agency, I have reclaimed my own autonomy, and I've reclaimed my own identity. And within those contexts, I was thinking, is this what I want my legacy to be? That I say that my frivolousness, that my freedom and my liberty are more important than contributing to reducing the toxic input and imprint we have on this planet. So that's something that became quite important for me. And in that process, like, I used to love acrylic nails. Oh my god! Like, if I was still an influencer, I think you would just enjoy what type of crazy things I've done with my nails. Like, I've had teddy bears. I mean, just absolutely. Like, I adore nails, and you can vouch for that. And they were also very long and very sharp.
Yes.
Yes, but all of that has kind of gone away. If there is one thing that I'm very, very adamant about, that is reducing the toxic imprint that we have on nature. So this is actually the last oil painting I've created. And after this, I've completely transferred to digital with the capacity to print on velvet, which has kind of become a main output. So everything that you see that is done here, I would create on a pad, and then I would translate those on different textures and materials, and weaving, and is very beautiful to me. So in that context, let's start by looking at it, what we have here. And I have to say, part of what inspired this painting is Philippe Guston's work. And I'm not going to speak too much about it, because a lot of these, Philippe Guston is a very controversial due to his ties with Ku Klux Klan. I have to say that although I am divided when it comes to those dimensions, I do have to say that the way his technical output as a painter, I find it quite gorgeous, and I really enjoy seeing that part of his work, without going further into it. So I sometimes think whether but it would be too, or like whether this work should have been circular. Should have created it as a circular one. Maybe I should actually even have actually, look, when I think about it, maybe.
Why would you like to have it circular?
Yeah, why would I have liked to have it circular? Because I feel that this thematics that is portrayed here is also the one that is inevitably tied to circularity. But we can look at it canvas and speak a bit about it to kind of give deeper. So the first thing that you kind of notice is that you have a beautiful blue sky, nuanced again. I've been speaking about nuancing, diluting quite a couple of times throughout season. And this gradation is something that is very important for me just in general. I actually mentioned this in the book as well. So, and on one side we have something that resembles a very warm earth. It's very earthy, it's warm, it's almost a desert, but it's not. Um, and then you have the egg, and the egg is partially a mess, like the way it's not a mess, not in that context, but it's if you think about all the ways one could have painted egg, this kind of falls, like you kind of see a bit feel of Guston references, but you also kind of see dabbing. You like, given the fact that this piece is in 3D and it becomes quite trippy when you kind of come close to it, because it is painted to exist within this narrative between being in a 2D, but also it has these elements that make it pop out in 3D. And I think this is a very interesting discussion because it kind of ties back to my eyes and my perception, because for you this piece is clearly a 3D piece. We have discussed this, I remember.
Yes.
While for me, I can see it simultaneously as a one existing in a 2D plane as a flat, but I also see how it kind of pops in and out of this 3D dimension. An egg is a very like, it's such a strong and symbolic, so it's just a strong symbol, the symbol of birth, but also the symbol of what came first, the chicken or the egg. And then you have the hand, and the hand is gray. There is something quite solid about it. To me, there is this like stony dimension about it, like it resembles stone that comes above from the sky and interacts with the egg. The touch is interesting.
I think the hand's interaction is quite interesting because it is definitely interacting, but is it touching? To me, I would almost say that there isn't a touch. There is a membrane between the finger and the egg. And I also like that this hand seems very... It's very outer-worldly. It's not just that it comes from above. If you were to put an egg on the ground and a human were to put his hand down, the angle would be that the hand came from atop. But still there is something outer-worldly about this hand. It feels not in place with its surroundings. Of course, you are the artist, so that's up for you to speak about whether or not that's the reference of it. But that's how it looks to me. I want to say one more thing before I give the word back to you. Another thing that I think is very interesting with the egg on its whole, and I have a feeling you might come back to this later, because I have a sense that this might be fitting into some of the narratives with how it is. But it's very interesting with how you have painted the segregation between the egg yolk and the egg white, because it is almost like it is an eye that is looking upwards. It is an egg, but it's almost like an eye. And then you have this finger, and the interaction of the finger is almost like it creates the retina in the eye. And then you also have the disruptance of the finger in the eye. Which sort of gives me a bit of biblical references, which doesn't have to be right.
Oh, but there is no wrong. Tell me about the biblical reference now. I'm intrigued.
Well, no, I have to go over to English, but there is a saying in the Bible. I'm not going to be too precise about this. I think it's one of Jesus' fables, where a friend comes over to someone and he says, please let me remove the splinter from your eye. And I can't remember if it goes like something like, how can you come over to someone and offer to remove their splinter when you haven't seen your own stick in your own eye.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, because there is a word saying in Norwegian how like you're seeing stubs in someone's house, but no, in someone's eye, but you can't see your own splinter.
I'm saying it is a biblical.
It's a biblical
yes.
reference, but yeah, I'm not, like I'm not sure how you translated it, and if there is an equivalent in English. It probably is.
It most definitely is. It's
Yeah.
translatable, but I don't know if it is used.
Is Bible translated to English?
Yes.
No. When did that happen?
I think 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I
was hibernating then. I'm sorry,
yeah.
I don't know what's happened.
So what I think is more important is whether or not that saying is. To me, that saying feels more common in the Norwegian language. I'm not sure if that is as I haven't heard it expressed as such in the English language, like that's a common phrase used. But that might be my ignorance. The viewers are gonna love that.
I was itching and this was scratching.
Wow. All right, but back to you. You can speak about what I have spoken about, or you can go any direction you would like.
No, but I think you've already gone in quite a beautiful direction that kind of not summarizes, but definitely adds layers to this narrative. Because if you kind of think about the sky is such a I don't know, for some reason I've been devouring ancient Asian cultures. So Korean, Chinese, and Japanese, and there's a lot of series and movies where the father, the emperor, resides in the sky, which it also does in Christianity. Buddhism, I think Buddhism is like Buddhism and Hinduism, and all religions are probably closest to kind of figuring out that the world is a bit of a weird simulation where nobody has postulated the one which needs to decide, but here we are in the Western world, and I can only speak about the references that I've grown up with, which are the Christian ones. So you kind of have this reference of something coming down from the sky, and that being stoned or portrayed stone-like.
Yeah.
Where the father residing in the sky is also the one that has established the law. Now, why is that important? Why are we here speaking about all these references that a lot of people would say that don't pertain to their lives? Well, that's not true. The fact that you've grown up in the Western world means that you have a myriad of theological underpinnings that you don't actually understand that you even have, because they're so deeply ingrained in society that they are taken as almost this fable-like but truisms. And I don't mean that in a contradictory sense. I mean they are fable-like because they have the essence of a fable, but they're truisms due to through the means that they're so adopted and so incorporated in our existence that they have become truisms in a sense. So you have this dimension where something ascends from the sky, but that is stone-like. It's fixed. It's fixated.
So it is important for you that it is fixed.
For me,
There's
this piece is
that it is a fixed.
This is an incredibly personal piece. It's incredibly personal piece, and I'm not going to do I am already going in why it's incredibly personal piece. I think that I've given enough clues to what's at without me.
Enough information.
I've inscribed the information on canvas without going too much far into it, but what has been a very fascinating dimension for me is that how the law has been established, but also how the new being represented in the egg reacts to that law. Because on one side we see a hand and we see an impact. But if, as you say, if you kind of look closer to it, it doesn't look like the finger is inherently touching the egg. It feels like the egg has, there is a, what do you call it, concavity in the egg. And due to the nature of our ability to connect information, to apprehend information, it's kind of in the similar ways that if the word has been spelled wrong, we can still discern the meaning of the word because our brain corrects it in a sense. So for many people, they would say that, I think a lot of people would say that this finger is touching the egg and is creating this concavity. But the question is it really? Is this what what is happening?
Is something ever touching anything?
I will let you continue on that tangent because I'm very, very interested what follows. But I'm not sure how to answer that. Both yes and no.
Well, with how the fields and everything are, when we are touching, there is segregation. So there is always there isn't necessarily a full contact. It is registered as contact, but things are pushed and pulled in different directions. So it's almost like Newton's third law in practice in this egg, with opposing forces.
Tell me.
Once again, I'm so glad that I get to not plan this out ahead.
That's all right. Yeah. I mean, we were not planning this episode. I think one of the reasons why we wanted to create this because me and Christian have quite gorgeous discussions with very interesting underpinnings, and I'm utilizing these works to invite you into our world, because we have created something gorgeous between us, and I think that's the beauty of it. So we're not prepping beforehand. We're letting the conversation go freely. But I think you've said something actually very interesting. It is registered as impact. It is registered as interaction, and yet it does not have to be as such. And I love that. I absolutely love that.
I'm quite sure that the particles aren't ever touching. It's the interacting of the fields of the opposing forces. So it's like pushing two magnets towards each other. You're not really getting the north you're not really getting north towards north.
Exactly. But what is also kind of a disconnect to it connects with it again, like that fatherly hand coming down from the sky, which does not even exhibit its corporeal influence to create an impact, but it exhibits an invisible force. So you can kind of say that concavity, one way or the other, is a project of an invisible force that can be extended by the means of it coming from the hand. However, it can also pertain to the sensitivity of the egg, because if egg yolk, and we know everybody knows that if you kind of like raw egg yolk, I have to say sometimes from time to time I miss eggs. I hallucinate about having eggs, and then I smell it and I'm like, no, thank you.
You hallucinate. You're
like
not dreaming. You're just
okay, fine.
Interesting
Dreaming.
word of choice, but yes.
I have never hallucinated an egg. I am pretty sure about that. But egg yolk that is kind of that it's in its most perfect has this ability to maintain its shape even if you touch it.
There's a membrane.
There's a membrane, yes. So the force that has been established does not actually say anything about neither the impact of the hand, nor does it say anything about the egg. Egg can be sensitive and the force exhibited on it can be minuscule, and yet it has established an impact. Or the force can be so great that the egg is severely impacted. And we see the results of it here. And I think it's kind of interesting observing this concept in the context of individual apprehension. I think society is very interesting because we're always in the context of agency, who has agency over what, and where is that agency placed? I'm very, I almost wanted to say blame, but I don't think, I mean, blame is also a very good word here, because given how this world is spinning, who is to blame? Which forces have interacted? Who is where within that narrative, within that puzzle? So I enjoyed that this egg existing within this dimension of ambiguity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where does that lead you forward with it? Some other dimensions
Well,
to me.
it leads me toward this part where I'm thinking, we all have difficult relationships in our families, with our friends, etc., workplace, etc., etc. And this dimension of blame and agency is kind of a cat and mouse chase. It's like Tom and Jerry. You can't actually figure out who of them is evil. Like, who of them is the one that is like, yes, inciting for the detrimental. So you kind of are looking at this piece and you're like, oh, cool, interesting, right? But then it's like, what does it mean, and why does it mean that? I've contemplated a lot about my life. Like, I had to feel like at one point I was quite lost in my own multiplicity, and thus a lot of time has been spent in attempting to sort, to organize, to categorize what is happening and why is it happening. And thus this concept of who's blame to blame for what, and who's, and I say blame because I kind of come from a culture that has been exposed to a very dark force, which war is, and bombing, where the question of blame becomes very pertinent. And thus I have learned how to think in those terms. But I think upon coming to London, I understood that it's not about the blame, but it's about the agency. What type of agency do you have as an individual to navigate your own life? And that connects to a different question.
Yes.
I'm not going to say it. Do you have any thoughts about what I'm saying before we go there?
Not in the broad, like I, not in direct relation to what you're saying. I think I do have some thoughts and something I want to ask about this piece. I can do it now, or I can save it for later.
You know what? Do it now. I'm interested.
Well, there is one last segment that I feel I haven't, or that is evident to me. Like, this to me is this is probably my clear favorite piece, since we were speaking of my favorite pieces. Your other series of information is my favorite concept. This is my favorite piece. But of course, this rings perhaps a bit differently to me, because I do have the references with the above, the interaction of the finger and all of these things, but I don't necessarily feel it on such a personal level. And it's also very soothing to the eyes, like how the colors, how it's put up, it's stunning. But what I wanted to point out is that we have this sky, the gradation of it and everything. We have from the almost where it goes into like infinite darker and darker upwards and out and beyond, to it becoming lighter down below. Then we have this earth component that you spoke about, desert like, not fully as you said, but like, and then you have the light part of it and you have the darker. But then you have this egg, which is, to my eye, almost resting on a membrane on top of it. It's not really interacting with anything besides the finger, which it's also, as we said, if this finger was to disappear, the egg would, if I were to guess, it would go back to its original shape. Not maybe its fully original shape, but I don't think the dent would be there. And I'm wondering if there is a conscious thought behind the general separation of the egg from its surroundings.
What do you mean separation?
Well, if we look at the lines underneath there, it's almost like it's resting on top of it. Sometimes, I'm not gonna say that this is the thought behind it, but sometimes if I choose in my mind to not look at an egg, it's almost like it's a spaceship that's on top or hovering, like a craft hovering on top of the ground, which I almost always find amusing.
That's the thing, isn't it? I guess sometimes I do. Sometimes I do point out that I wonder if you actually understand that we've been together for 15 years and that I feel that you don't know me. And then yet you come with certain dimensions where I have not intended necessarily to speak about, and then you just kind of hit the nail on the head because you are very right. What is happening here is that this is the shade. This is the shade of the egg. Then the question is, and also you can't see exactly behind me, but there are two tiny black snakes or two black things that put the perspective of how big this egg is actually supposed to be.
Yeah, because I wasn't gonna mention those since they're not in
they're
there,
not
but
in there.
yes, I could have elaborated a bit more with what I thought about
So generally this egg is meant to be experienced as something quite large. So something quite large. And the way the egg is positioned, it is positioned slightly tilted towards up. So it's almost like this egg has started to hover and is going upwards. And then you have the law. You have the finger. Because can the egg slide through? Can it fly further?
Or a bit of a brutal interpretation right there.
But that's what this piece is about for me, at least.
Yes, I can see that.
So can this egg hover? Can it move? Can it move?
I have a good feeling that it can. It looks like it can.
It did. It definitely did. It didn't. So I think this is such an impactful piece for me. Exactly because as I was going through my own trauma, my own battle culminates in this piece. And it also being symbolically the last piece I made in oil. I'm sorry. I'm being silent because it is quite emotional. Speaking about this because we have never done that. Do you have anything while I regain my consciousness and regain my thoughts? Do you want to continue? Do you have something more to say?
Well, I think I sort of laid out my thoughts surrounding this this thing. I of course could always speak about my personal apprehension of it, because I said to me it's a bit more of I understand the thematics of it, but it has a bit of it also has a bit of this absurdity to it with what it is that is at play here, and I think a part of my brain is enjoying the dichotomy of those absurdities in this painting.
What type of absurdities?
Well, you have this quite big egg that is interacting, non-interacting with its surroundings, partially hovering, whilst you have this to me the hand could also be like a symbolist of humanity, of a scientist, of something. It is that very almost childlike apprehension where you almost comes a bit dumbfounded, but you have seen this new thing and you're now just all like, oh, how does it react if I poke it? That
Yeah,
would be
it
intriguing.
definitely there is a painting by Saint John Baptist where, uh, like they're inspecting the Jesus's wound. So you kind of where we mentioned that this dimension of the real, and that is exactly what it is, because the question is the question of the law coming down from the heavens and the force that is being established but inherently not belonging to neither nor incites the question of free will.
It incites the question of free will. You have to say something more there because I have a feeling you alluded to in the previous episode that you would be going into the free will conundrum. But
But it kind of really pertains to the sensitivity and the force exhibited on it, because the way how we speak about how what is free will, what if you kind of think of what do you put in the concept of free will?
well, it's not that I'm trying to be difficult here, but my concept and how I have believed in free will has sort of gone a bit back and forth over the years. And I think I have been firmly in both camps at certain times. And now I have sort of swung back to. I'm not sure if I should give my conclusion away, but I have sort of swung a bit back to that it's not necessarily clear for neither nor.
Yeah, I think there is this. I actually, free will is a hyper interesting question, especially. I also think free will is very interesting in the context of societal apprehension. I would very much like. I would love for somebody to conduct an experiment where they go across social and cultural and economical backgrounds and ask the question of if whether free will exists, and then kind of see who answers what.
So you want a socio-economic study over free will and a poll. Actually, that shouldn't be very hard to create.
No,
but
it shouldn't
yes.
be, but it's quite interesting because
Maybe that can be your next piece. You can create a web page where it's
you know what I'll also tell, like after this I kind of stopped. I've put myself more towards painting because I really enjoy painting. I think that my mind has gone through so much information that people cannot in the process of self-healing, um, that I had to give my mind a rest from all of these gloriously big topics and just focus on something that relaxes me, which is pure painting. That doesn't mean the concepts dissolve. One can never dissolve a concept. If something has been painted or created, it always has its meaning and its concept. So it's not about that. But I had to put away all of these big narratives a bit aside. But I wanted to say...
It's very interesting what you're saying there, because that's perhaps what you're perceiving. But as we spoke about with your first series that we presented, it ended up being about something that perhaps wasn't your intention whilst doing it. So there's probably a lot of big questions wandering around in your work.
Yes, of course. But now I'm enjoying more how things are made than wired, and then why and what is made. And I think people underestimate of how something is. Well, they kind of don't. There is inherent slowness to art and artists that is inevitable and quite well placed as well. But let's go back to the piece. So to me, as I was kind of going through my life and wondering how have things happened and why did things happen, etc., you have this dimension of the law that has been imposed because of whether I wanted it or not, Serbia is a highly patriarchal country, one way or another. So you have this dimension. However, within every hierarchy or every established law, there is always somebody who knows how to challenge that law in an interesting way. So there you have kind of the question of agency. So this whole dimension between this whole interaction between the earth, the hovering egg, the impact but not so, and then the hand from the above, is the question that also pertains to the free will, which again is contingent upon the force of agency. Because what is free will? For the way I look upon free will is one being at complete capacity to have autonomous decisions over one's body and its actions.
Is mind included in this?
Yes, mind is part of the body. Body is part of the mind. I'm not necessarily. I'm not a dualist at all. I am. If you kind of call what you can call me is a multiplicity. I don't know. That's a bad word for it. Yeah, that's a bad word. But what is really interesting to me is this dimension where free will exists within its capacity, where if I say that I want to raise my hand, I'm going to raise my hand. I can raise my hand. I can, if I want to speak, I can speak. If I don't want to speak, I can speak. I don't have to speak. However, free will becomes a very bizarre thing as soon as one understands that one is not incomplete, does not have complete authority over one's actions. Simplest case, saying something embarrassing at the wrong time. We've all done it. That becomes interesting because saying something in the wrong time or being in a certain way in X, Y, and Z scenarios, for example, if one is nervous, like I come from places where I've observed a lot of people. Well, let's go like this. I observed a lot of people that when they come to the dentist's office, they start joking, although they're inevitably nervous. So there you have one response where your body is inciting one saying they're experiencing one thing, but the way it's choosing to interpret that is in a different way. So you can say that that's free will, but it can also say that's a response, and that's in-learned response. If somebody is nervous at a party, it happens often that people talk too much. They become very talkative. Nothing wrong with that. Like, that's your MO if that's your MO, but are you conscious of if that is your MO and what does that MO mean? And if that MO is leading you towards where you want.
So what you're speaking of is if there is outer signals, or what you're speaking of is if there is an alignment between what your mind would have liked to have happened compared to all the drivers of what is happening.
Exactly, because free will is contingent upon the informational processing and understanding of meaning. So, and 37 trillion cells, people. They synchronize, parts of them synchronize into this focused unity that we call the self, but at the same time, they kind of, not everything does. You kind of have this effect of ghost in the machine, of echoes that exist of different narratives, different possibilities, different potentials, and how those are navigated kind of depends upon consciousness. So to discuss free will, you kind of have to discuss free will in the context of what? And free will, again, pertains to agency, and agency pertains to understanding of our own coordinates within this dimension of informational processing.
Is it a simplification to speak about the what? Because you could speak about absolute free will. Do you, by your inherent choice in every choice you do, actually have free will, or do you not? So you could refer it to what, but for instance, if you say that free will is that you have the will to do whatever you would like, and someone says they want to buy a cruise ship, well, if they don't have the financial means to acquire that cruise ship, you could always argue very superficially that they don't have free will. But that's obviously not what's being discussed. And when we sink it down to deeper levels, then I'm saying, do we really need the what? It is much more about, do you have this base agency over doing things? Like, is it my choice for instance, what I choose to eat? Is that my choice, or have I just been programmed through society and inputs throughout, or subsystems within my own body that I'm not aware of voting, and I end up with something? And then the question is that something still my will, or isn't it? Is that
But I mean, free will is a very interesting topic for me, who has gone through this eating disorder, where I have countless of times observed myself doing something that I do not want to do to myself, and yet I couldn't stop over and over again. And I'm not a feeble-minded person, and yet my program that has been embedded so deeply in me, because bodily dissonance is something that is, well, it doesn't exist solely in my family. It exists in it's I think we as females have a very there is a strong need to start addressing this in a good way, and not in a way you can do whatever you want, it's your body, because you can do whatever you want, but
that's just the that is the that is the equally extreme counterpart of the other viewpoint.
yes, exactly.
So it needs to meet somewhere in between.
Yes, people need to, there is this dimension of nuancing. So in the context of free will, I was like, yes, I can. Also in the context of free will, going back to the Snickle series, I painted something. I thought that I was exercising my free will and painting one thing, but then it turns out that was something completely different. So free will in this dimension is a very interesting concept to discuss.
It is a fairly evident concept in this, like that free will definitely is a part of this. Yeah, it's absolutely a question that is being discussed in this piece.
Do you understand why I was kind of started speaking that maybe this piece would be interesting as a circular one, but then I kind of also think it would be too obvious.
Well, both yes and no. Like, the circle would of course be a symbol in itself, but like
so is the rectangle.
Yeah, the rectangle is as well, and the symbol is already there almost, with the egg yolk already being a circle.
Did you see there's a smiley face in the egg? I like smiley face.
It is most certainly a very happy egg compared to.
Yeah, I mean, this egg is just wagging. It's just like, I'm going to Hoover. And yet you have this interaction where you kind of are wondering whether it's kind of interesting to kind of look at it like, is this hand going to push more towards the egg? Is it going to stop the egg from its further? Because there is inherent movement in this egg, whether it's hoovering or it's kind of going upwards, or if it's moving across the surface. I'm not at that part. I'm not entirely sure, but there is this question for me where I kind of look at it and I'm thinking like, does this finger stop the egg?
So there's something I always find interesting with this, and I might be off again, but we had the two snakes over there, which also could indicate movement. So it could indicate that the egg is sliding this direction. But that's actually not what I wanted to speak about. It's more about the hand again. To me, there is something. It's not. My references sound so off if I'm formulating this wrongly, but it's not the hand. It is something about the interaction between the hand and the egg that almost feels childlike to me. It is almost like the hand isn't fully aware of its impact and what it is doing. And I don't have a feeling that it is necessarily gonna continue on pushing. It is almost like a child discovering something that is new, that is like a discovery, and it is like doing that weird thing. It is interacting with it, but it's not like too hard interacting with it either. But to me, it feels like the hand will pull back. And I don't know why I have that. I have no idea why that sense is so strong with me.
But do you know what is interesting for me? Like, I enjoy that you're saying that, because that means that you're seeing a different set of references than I am, or different because I am a Veratian, so that means that I have been very much convinced by um, what we call like a theoretical physicist. Is that's what a cosmologist and theoretical physicist
Yeah,
Sean Carroll.
it's just so funny that he gets like the he's like the unofficial leader of Aberratians.
Yes.
But yes, go on. You're on Aberratian.
Where all the worlds exist as projection of the wave function or the probability curve of its existence. So that means, and how every single stroke is made, since this piece represents all of my emotions and all of these dimensions that we're speaking about it now, that means that part of what you are experiencing in this egg has been imprinted strongly enough. It has been that particular dimension has been traced and retraced to a sufficient degree that your own apprehension apparatus allows for it to establish such possibility.
It's not just a possibility. I would go as far as saying I'm sure the hand is pulling back.
Because for me, the main interaction happens here, where I'm almost kind of like, if I look at this egg, it's really shiny. Like the sun, the light comes forward towards it, and then you have, it's almost like glass-like for me. So I'm almost wondering if the egg actually had this dent to begin with. And then the finger is coming down to figure out whether it's dent, and then they're gonna get stuck where the egg can't move and the finger can't pull because the egg is attempting to move.
This is panning out to be quite a complex story.
Of course, it's a complex story. Well, as complex as the human interpreting it.
Well,
No,
yes, most certainly, but it's why not?
Why not? But that's the thing, isn't it? So that's what I'm telling you. You're very certain of that, and I kind of apprehend it in this way, and potentially that is what made me sad, because my journey towards here has not been an easy one. I have, for somebody who has her whole life just yearned to have an absolute freedom and know how to navigate absolute freedom. Don't misunderstand me. Like, I don't think freedom. I think freedom is non-existence if you don't know how to navigate it, because that means that one is again fallen prey to the inner clockworks of pre-established parameters. So going back to growing up, going back to agency systems that have been embedded early on. So I was somebody who was just who is still not still. I've climbed my mountain. Who is at the place where this has not been like an utterly easy task, and especially within me in this dimension with oil. I thought that oil would set me free, and ended up trapping me kind of even more, because I don't deal. My body does not have the capacity to tackle the toxicity, and I know you as well are of such character that you could not go into my studio because you don't tolerate the smell. You kind of, even if it's odorless turpentine, you still sense it.
Well, yes, I'm almost annoyingly sensitive when it comes to solvents.
Well, solvents, perfumes, food smells, etc., etc., etc. So this was a very hard-earned knowledge that I've kind of acquired, and that battle for me has been absolutely excruciating. And I think it's like, when I was painting this, I was wondering, should I just give up everything? Like, is this painting telling me that I'm not moving anywhere, and that the law that has been established has already contained me within such parameters that will not be able to move? So you saying this dimension where that finger will pull, not only it also kind of really touches upon something fascinating, and it is that dimension where your own mindset and where your own circumstances that you have been brought upon under define what you see. It's like glass half full, glass half empty kind of scenario. Um, and that's really interesting to me.
I agree.
That's really, really interesting to me.
Yes, and it's once again all the underlying references, the apprehension, the perception, how my model is built upon what I am watching compared to yours. Like, I don't know if I have agency over that decision that I made there, but that is the decision that I've fallen upon, and it feels like my own.
But that's the thing. Like we earlier today, we also, I can't remember what we were discussing, but I also kind of we kind of touched upon the basis of the subsystems that are embedded within the human psyche of during the early developmental period. So let's say from one is born to age 11, 12. Because there's a lot of subsystems that we don't even know exist, but that define a lot of our decisions and a lot of patterns of behavior that we inevitably inherited through such means.
Yes, I would almost, to me, that fits better as I think of it as programming. I think subsystems is also fine. A subsystem is in many ways what is the result after the programming. But we were speaking about how actually through several occasions through the day, which is interesting. We were speaking about how incidents that happens during your forming years in your youth often ends up having a lot of a much more of a long-lasting impact on your personality, and often keeps on staying on board maybe long after you feel that perhaps you even are conscious of yourself. It's like an underlying thing that keeps on being there.
Yes, yes, and that's what this piece is about. Um, I had so much struggle with this piece. It was so interesting. Like I was painting that egg yolk over and over and over again, mister. And I
And
was painting that sky over and over and over again because I like if this was done in airbrush, the smoothness would be quite beautiful. But I don't deal with acrylics. I think like the plastic dimension of acrylics gives me a very cold feel, and I think just with the increasingly digital dimension, this part where I translated onto something as tactile as velvet is such a has made such a gorgeous impact on me that especially like as a woman who has always whose art has been traditionally translated through means of weaving. So for me, like that dimension of translation is like really important. One thing that went very smoothly was painting the hand. So I guess, but it was also
because you would have thought that would perhaps be the more challenging part of this. I don't have much experience painting skies or hands or eggs or anything of it, but the hand and the egg is what I would have thought were the challenges. So it's interesting that it's the egg yolk and the night sky.
Well, the egg white was also a challenge, just because I wanted to induce this like 3D effect, and I don't, because just how my eyes are, my depth field perception is not like, it has taken me a very long time to understand how to paint in depth. So that has also taken its own thing. But I think it's very fascinating because exactly in the context of my upbringing, I've always kind of learned how to the law's existence has always been quite apparent to me, and that's maybe why painting the hand was not problematic for me. So that law, that dimension of something that is very heavily in inscribing its existence onto everything else living, has always been quite apparent to me. While this dimension of agency, of how to turn things around and how to hoover and how to let go and fly yourself, that part has been wailed to me for a very long time, like, I mean, before it culminated in what I'm doing now, which one thing at a time, I guess.
More of that in season 2, perhaps.
Potentially season 2. I'm not sure if we're going to do a season 2. Yes, let's see how things continue. Thank you very much again. Thank you for your energy and your attention. And thank you, Chris, for creating space in your very, very busy schedule for me to do this.
Pleasure.
And then we're going to say goodbye.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Bye.